This is Creepy and Geeky. Hey, all you creeps and geeks. I'm your host, Robert, and today's episode is part 3 in my Scream series, and we're talking all about Scream 5 and 6, so be prepared for lots of spoiler talk in this episode. Joining me for this discussion is returning guest Kat Hughes, and she's a film journalist who primarily writes for the Hollywood News. Welcome back to the show, Kat.
Thank you for having me back. I am very excited to talk about these two films.
Oh, me too. I'm very excited, especially the new movie just came out a couple of weeks ago, and it's most people seem to really enjoy it. So it'll be fun to talk about, get your thoughts on it, and to see see how this goes over. But first, a new thing that I'm doing is talking to people about trying to get to know the guest a little bit. And so you've been on a few times, but I never asked you this, so this will be the first time doing it. So, what was your first horror movie? If you
So I grew up with a young mum during the 80s who was heavily into a horror. So I would always wander in and out of various films. I remember seeing snippets of Dolls and the Ghoulies really little, but I think the one that sticks in my mind as being the one that I saw the most of, the youngest, would have been the first Gremlins film. I came in quite early, and my mum had twigged that it wasn't the scariest of the films that I could have walked in on, and she was just like, yeah, sit down. But at the end of the night, I made her sort of go into my room and check underneath my bed and stuff, because there's just that Rand Peltzer as the thing, if there's something wrong with your TV or your car won't start, maybe, just maybe. And that I would have been 3, I think.
Oh,
just
wow. Okay.
stuck in my head. And then the next year she introduced me to Gremlins 2, and I became fixated with it and watched it every single day for the 2 years that I was in infant school, which I think is like kindergarten in the UK, in the US, and to the point of having tantrums when babysitters would come around and want to watch something else. So I quickly got over any fear I had of Gremlins by the time the sequel rolled around.
That's funny. Yeah, I remember. I did have been 10, I think, when Gremlins came out. I think what Gremlins was 84 or 85.
84. It's the year I was born.
Okay, there you go.
I cling to that good year.
So I was 10 that year. So and I remember it coming out, and I remember it being huge. We actually had a set of books with records in them that kind of told the whole story. And I love that. It was just, I was obsessed with Gremlins for a good, a good while as well, just because it was just fun. So I can understand.
Yeah, it's a great film. It's a great start to horror as well, because
Oh yeah,
the first one especially has some really dark moments in it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you look back on it now and it's like, yeah, it's kid friendly ish, but also because it's the 80s, that's what we thought was kid friendly.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't.
No.
We wouldn't show that to kids these days. Not I mean, I would, but I was the one who showed my daughter Seed of Chucky when she was 3. So uh, all right.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into Scream. We're gonna start with Scream 5, of course. And this was the return of Scream after what, 11 years, and post Wes Craven. So it was nobody knew how this was going to go. We were all, for the most part, I think most people were tentatively excited about the prospects of new Scream, especially once we all found out that Kevin Williamson was going to be a producer on it. So at least it felt like somebody, from the originals was still kind of steering the ship in a way. So that was good.
Yeah, and then you add to that your core characters of Sydney, Gale, and Dewey had all signed on to return. I think that also helped
Yeah.
alleviate any tensions. And then the inclusion of radio silence for anybody that had watched and enjoyed Ready or Not, it seemed like quite an interesting pairing to see
Yeah.
how they would work with it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm a big fan of Ready or Not. That's a great movie. So as soon as I heard that they were on board for doing this, I was pretty much completely sold from the beginning. And I was excited to see what they were going to do with it. And you know, I was pleasantly surprised and very happy with the end result of Scream 5.
Yeah, it was strange that you say it not being Wes anymore, and so much time had passed and horror had changed so much. So it was definitely settling down to watch it an interesting experience to see how they had incorporated everything that had changed within horror, because I mean, the first Scream is very knowledgeable and referential to the classics Nightmare on Elm Street and Halloween and Psycho. And then suddenly you've got this film which is in its first scene, poking fun at elevated horror and the Babadook and It Follows and
Right.
things. It's very strange. The first Scream, I was sort of just getting into the genre in a way, and the films that it was homaging and mentioning were things that I'd maybe seen bits and pieces of, but I hadn't gone too deep into. But by the point that we get to Scream 5, I knew all of these films intimately,
Yeah.
that they these new wave of films that they were referencing, and that was a strange experience for me as a viewer.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. And especially like I agree. Like for me, I fell in love with the Scream franchise from the first one. And I've been a fan ever since. And I've seen literally every one of these in theaters. Um and it's and like you said, yeah, it you know, the first one and all the ones since then all reference, the older horror movies and everything. And for me, as somebody who was more of a casual horror person up until more recent years, it was fun because I knew enough about horror movies to engage with what they were doing in the first Scream movie. I didn't get all the references, of course, but I got most of them. And then now, having been fully immersed into horror the last few years, by the time this Scream movie came out, I had seen all of those movies and understood them all and totally got the joke of pretty much everything in this one. And it was just, yeah, it was just more fun than uh in a way more fun because I knew all that. So but yeah, it's this one is interesting because we get this new cast of uh this new younger cast, and they kind of tried to do that with number 4. And I have a feeling that with number 4, it just, I don't know, it just didn't feel like it worked as well. It's a good movie, of course. Like none of the Scream movies are bad or anything, but it's like they tried to do that with number 4, and they were going to create a new trilogy with 4 on, but it for whatever reason it didn't come to pass. And so now with this number 5, they created this whole new group of kids that's this second generation, people who are related to people from the first movie. And so that was a more interesting way of doing it, and a different dynamic, I think, than what we had with this, like with what was in number 4, this kind of interim generation. That was kind of, they were trying to pass the torch to in a way.
Yeah, because isn't Jill Sydney's niece? But there's
She's
been
her
like
cousin. Yeah.
cousin, that's it. But there's been no mention of this relative in any. It felt very much like, how can we wheel in somebody new? Oh, I don't know, let's give her a
Right.
long lost cousin. It's a very soap opera
Yeah.
thing to do, with like, oh, here's your long lost, stepfather from, the war. It felt very much like that. But this new wave did feel a little bit more organic, especially the twins of Chad and
Yes.
Mindy being Randy's niece and nephew, and we get to see obviously their mother. And then obviously Sam's character hinges on the fact that she is Billy Loomis's daughter. I think the first time I watched it, I was a bit on the fence about how I felt about that, because
Yeah.
he would have had to have been cheating on Sydney, which makes sense because it wasn't like Billy was in love with Sydney. He was trying to punish her. But there was still something that almost didn't quite feel authentic to me, in that he was so obsessed with Sydney and, getting back at her mother through her, that I'm not sure he really had much time for other women. But the more I've sat with it, the more I kind of accept it as being what it is. And it does present some interesting scenarios with Sam, who's dealing with some mental health issues, and she's being plagued by the knowledge that her father was this massive serial killer that caused a lot of people a lot of trauma. And there's some really nice scenes as she's trying to work out who she is in relation to what he was.
Right. Yeah, no, I felt the same way. Like I felt like it was a little weird to have this whole Billy Loomis connection. I figured that, because there was the whole year that um he mentions in Scream 1 about how it's been a whole year that since her mom's death, and and she didn't Sydney didn't want to have anything to do with him, affectionate wise or sexually or anything like that. So, it makes sense in a way, his toxic brain and everything, that he would just go and cheat with somebody else in the meantime to get that physical connection that he was wanting, uh, while he was still trying to work out what he was going to do to Sydney and everything. So it's really messed up. but but it makes sense to in the overall storyline.
Yeah, I'm still very interested to know who the mother is, though. Like, is it a
Yeah.
character that we did see in the original Scream? Is it one of the? I think the common assumption is that it's the girl in the bathroom, one of the girls in the bathroom that's like
Right.
poking fun at Sydney. But I'm not too sure how either of those women and Billy Loomis result in Sam, because Sam isn't a blonde white American woman.
Yeah.
I think she's the one in the first Scream film, isn't she? That's like seems to be
Yeah.
very anti Sydney. So I'm interested to see if at any point in any future installments they maybe bring her in, or dial back, and if it's going to be just some random side character. I imagine that that's what
Right.
it'd be more be. She'd just be some random. Maybe she didn't even. I don't know. No, I think they do say that she went to Woodsboro, but she'll have just been some random in the cafeteria or something, some random at the party.
Right. Yeah, and and it's weird too because of the way the timeline works out and everything like that, that this is like, so if this was some woman that, like, when she mentions it too, Sam mentions it to her sister that she read her mom's diaries, and that her mom was in love with Billy, and that while she was dating Sam's, not Sam's, but Tara's dad. And so while they were at school, so it's like, so she was dating Tara's dad, and Billy was dating Sydney at the same time, and then they were both cheating on their respective boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever during that time. So it makes it, because I was thinking about it just now. I was like, well, how would she, like, why would she be okay with him just being around Sydney the whole time while they're doing stuff? But I remember that yeah, she was with Tara's dad still at the same time too. So, and that's why Tara's dad thought he was Sam's father as well. So, because the timing would work out like that. So, it's just yeah, it's a weird situation for sure. And seeing who this person be like, it's funny too because they've kind of teased it like, the mom was gone, and then now the mom doesn't want to have anything to do with either one of them in this new movie, and just we still don't know who this mom is. We've never seen her, and so it'll be interesting to get that part of it if they
Yeah,
choose to do it for the next one.
I mean, I was certain before I went into the new one that she was going to be Ghostface. Um, just because the opening call with Tara, Ghostface pretends to be Charlie from Group.
Right.
And like Tara's like, what group? And he's like, oh, from your mum's group. And she keeps pushing like to try and find out some information. The assumption is like AA or some similar support group, but that character that Ghostface is putting on never confirms. But when they get onto the topic of scary movies, it does go on to say, oh, your mum's always talking about that film in Group. She loves it. She's obsessed with it. It's her favorite film, which would link into their mum being in love with Billy. And there was all this marketing that was alluding to like a cult of Ghostface in the new one. And I was like, wouldn't it be really cool if it was their mum and we'd already been told about it in 5, and it was like a really long game. The first scene of 5, we're basically told that mum is part of this group, and maybe she's sent like Amber and Richie out on like a test thing to see, if Sam's got that killer Loomis spirit. And then in 6, she is revealed, and it wasn't. And it's a classic case of me overthinking. I mean, before Scream 5, I was certain. I even wrote an article about it. I was certain that Cal Gallner was going to be one of the ghost faces. There was all this marketing about how like the killer is on the poster, and I went through all of the old Screams, and on so many of them Ghostface is, and then on a couple of them they aren't. But there's even when there's 2 ghost faces, one of them tends to not be on the poster. So I was like, well, his name isn't on the poster, he's not on the poster, he's probably one of the most well-known faces in this new film going into it outside of the legacy characters. Surely he's going to pop up and be Ghostface. And then he arrived as Vince and ended up being the Drew Barrymore in the first like actual kill of the film instead. And that was my theory in the dirt. But it's
I'm fully on board with a full like Stu Macher's coming back / cult of Ghostface thing. That's what I want out of these movies, and they keep teasing it. They really are teasing it hard, in both ways. And I'm, I kind of want to get into the theories and stuff like that a little bit later. But yeah, that's something I've been hoping for, and they keep not giving it to me. I'm like, come on. And to be fair, I mean, they've got whatever ideas they want to do, and they're teasing that because they know that's kind of what everybody wants. So it kind of works for them to kind of flip that, because that's what Scream's all about, is flipping expectations. And so it's frustrating, sure, but I still like what we're getting. So but
and
it's go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I just sort of move on to that. I say that I liked what 5 did with the legacy characters in terms of like Dewey and Gale. This is a story that we've been following throughout films, and we know in real life that Courtney and David met on set, fell in love, married, divorced. So, they're with other people now. They've got new families, and that scene, the first scene between Gale and Dewey, was the first time that the actors had seen each other in a while because
Right.
of COVID and stuff. And while they were filming the scene, there was some of their own life coming through, to the point of, like, I think the first take that they did, the director sort of kept for them because they kind of
Yeah.
got all of their own personal things out. But it's really interesting thing when you're watching it, knowing the history, because it just makes Dewey and Gail feel real, because
Yeah.
in a weird way they are, which then feeds into this meta thing that has made the Scream franchise so popular. Like, even down to the people in the cast, we're getting into that sort of meta headache sort of
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah, like you can feel in that scene too. You can feel kind of all the heartache between them as well. Like
Mm.
it's definitely there in that scene. They did. Yeah, I read the same thing about how they, on that first take, they finished it and they were, um Courtney and David were like, yeah, that one was for us. Yeah, let's redo that so we could do it for the movie
Yeah.
itself. And yeah, it's hard. Yeah, if you've, like, these movies mean so much to them, just as much as they mean to the audience, if not more so, because, like you said, they met each other, fell in love, got married, got divorced through all of this. And they, um and then to return for this new one, for number five, after all of that, after all of that had already happened, because they had gotten divorced before number four
Yeah.
had filmed. And so, like, a lot of that was still raw with number four. And so then, another 11 years goes by, and they've, like you said, they've you know married other people, had families, moved on quite a bit, and then they come back to this series that has meant so much to their lives. That, yeah, it's crazy. And just, it was good to see them back, good to see them together. Um, I was one of the things I've loved about this series is, um, with number two, they did that little bit of music that actually comes from the movie Broken Arrow,
Yes.
when Dewey appears on screen, and which was originally just a temp track. They weren't really going to do that. They were actually going to put in the Marco Beltrami, Dewey's theme, but they put it in the temp track, and apparently showed it to test audiences, and test audiences went wild for it, and so they ended up keeping that track in, and it's become so iconic to his character that when they play it in number five, I lost it in the theater. I was just like, I went with my daughter and I was just nudging her, and she's like, what is going on? I'm like, they're playing his theme. So it was just glorious. And then, and we'll talk about it in the next one, but we get a little bit of a hint of that theme in the next one as well.
Yeah. But then obviously, the big thing that five did is it
Killed
killed a
off the
couple of,
legacy.
yeah. And
Yeah.
we killed off a couple. There's the sheriff,
Yep. Yeah.
lemon
Judy Hicks.
that's the one, with the lemon squares.
Yes.
um but it wasn't afraid to come back. Radio Silence weren't afraid to come back to this iconic franchise and be like, Dewey, that guy, that lovable deputy from the first film that everybody has fallen
The
in love
heart of
with,
the
like,
franchise.
yeah,
Yeah.
like, I'm sorry guys, but we're taking him away from you. It is so sad and heartbreaking, because
Oh, that.
he is, like you say, he is the heart of the franchise. And
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure if any of the other characters that have gone, I mean, I guess Sydney would have obviously been a massive shock, but if it had been Gail, I'm not sure it would have had quite the impact that Dewey's
Yeah.
death does. I mean, even Ghostface themselves is like, it was an honor. Like, they themselves understand how important this character is to this world.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that Dewey, unfortunately, like, as much as I hated it, like, it really, like, I was nearly on the verge of tears in the theater, but it had to be Dewey, because it definitely, I don't think the emotional impact would have been the same with either of the other two, because Gail, as much as we all love Gail, Gail is a character that you can see it coming to her at some point.
Mm.
And um because she's always the brash, like, one who's gonna like antagonize Ghostface the most. And then Sydney, if it happened to Sydney, you kind of be like, okay, well, it was she finally just couldn't outrun it. And so it's there's with both of them, you could kind of see it happening. And while we wouldn't be okay with either one of them, I just think that Dewey's just hurt so much more because he was the one who literally every movie almost died,
Yeah.
and barely survived each time. And it finally caught up to him, and it was just devastating, uh, especially for me because I've always loved Dewey. So, but yeah, it's that was that's where you knew that they were, definitely, upping the stakes in this movie. Like nobody was safe. Not a legacy, like none of the new people, for the most part. And so it's just yeah, I think it's interesting too because I feel like these new movies are more brutal in their kills as well. The what like the brutality of these ghost face are just they've always been um very violent and everything, but I don't know, just maybe because it's a new generation, our sensibilities have changed or whatever, but these kills were just felt so much more intense and harsh than they used to.
Yeah, it's like going back to Scream, all the deaths felt very planned out. They knew they were going to, how they were going to get Casey, and they set up the boyfriend in the yard. It was very theatrical because in their mind they were making their own sort of scary movie. And
Right.
now by five, you've got overzealous, impassioned fans of the films which were based on these events doing the
Right.
killing, and the kills reflect that rabid nature of the fans. I mean, they're very, very stab happy. Even in the opening altercation with Tara, she's never meant to be killed. She's always meant to be maimed just enough that Sam will come out
Yeah.
and go back to her sister. But it's really brutal. It's in a way
Oh yeah.
more brutal than what happens to Casey or to Jada Pinkett Smith's character in Scream 2, because you can feel that it feels more aggressive in than, I don't know, it's hard to quite articulate, but it does, it
Yeah.
feels meaner. It's
Yeah,
like,
that's what
yeah,
it is. It feels meaner. Yeah. Yeah, sorry. It's just like,
yeah,
yeah, I agree. It just feels insanely mean now. There's a cruelty to it, even more so than you would think that, the stuff that, Billy was doing, that just this seems even more intensely cruel. But yeah, I think that I love the new characters. I'm still a little soft on Sam, as a character. She's growing on me, especially in the new movie. But I don't know, for some reason I'm not fully connecting with her as much. But I love Tara, I love Mindy and Chad. So it's great to, have this, what we now know as the core four, from the new movie. But they're great characters overall. I like that they're two groups of siblings and that they're all connected. They were all friends and connected by Sam being a babysitter to all of them and everything. So there's this, a really deep connection between all of them. So
yeah, I agree in regards to Sam being the harder character to get on board with. Is I feel like even going back to 4, as new as Jill was, she was easier to connect to because she was closer to Sydney. Obviously, we find out that she's trying to be the new Sydney. So she's
Right.
almost sort of like manipulating herself into being Sydney. But Sam she's very different to Sydney. I feel that she's far more guarded and insular. I mean, she's left Woodsboro. She's obviously battling some demons, but that makes it very hard on a first meeting to know where you stand with her. You don't know if you can trust her. You know immediately that you can trust Sydney. She's this
Yeah.
all-American girl next door. But with Sam, you see pretty early on that she is being plagued by visions of Billy, and that instantly puts you on a back foot. And I think for the most part of the first film with her, you are questioning, well, is she just going to snap? Is that where they're going with this? Is Billy's daughter going to become Ghostface? And so I think that is where it's not until this newer film where you're presented with the opportunity to get to know her, because you've seen what she's gone through previously, and it's like, okay, she's not quite Billy Loomis. She's
Right.
clearly got the potential to go down that path should she wish to, but she's not. I guess she's been tainted by her father's reputation, so we're immediately mistrustful of her. I mean, on first watch, I preferred Richie to Sam. He was the more entertaining character.
Yeah.
I went back and forth because they were put, it's always the love interest, and so it's going to be him. But then I didn't want it to be him because he was doing all of this like pretending to have not seen any of the Stab films, and he was almost like alongside Mindy, another Randy 2.0, which as a cinephile I really enjoyed. So I was a little bit gutted when he was inevitably revealed to be the Ghostface, because I quite liked him up to that point. He seemed all right.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, and I think Sam, like in the first movie, she's fully defined for much of that movie in terms of her relationship to Billy.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty much all she's defined by. So we don't really get much of a sense of who she is as a person outside of that. I think that we're getting a little bit more of that in this new movie, but I think it still kind of hampers her a bit. This legacy. And I get it. I get that they're trying to do this in a way to continue on with this aspect of it. I just think that pull away from it a little bit and let's get more of who she is, just in her own person, and who she wants to be, not who she's potentially going to be. And so I think that if they kind of move past that and move the character a little bit more forward, then that would be more interesting for me.
Yeah, I mean, all we know about her in 5 is that she's Billy Loomis's daughter, and she abandoned her sister when she found this out. And though we don't know who their mother is, from what information we are given, she really is not the sort of parent that a younger sibling should have been left alone with.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's and I think that with Tara we get a little bit more with Tara's not a whole lot either, but the first movie is really kind of hard to do that. We're getting just the bare bones of who these characters are, to move them forward. Of course, with any legacy sequel like this, you're going to it's the first movie is always going to be an intro movie, and then move it forward into the next one, and that's what's great about number 6 is we get a little bit more into the characters as who they are themselves. But yeah, I was a little let down by the reveal of who the ghost faces were in number 5, being Richie and Amber. Not so much Amber. I mean, Amber was kind of expected.
Yeah.
My daughter actually called it. She had said that she told me afterward that she thought Amber was one of them all along, just based on she had looked at the poster and just kind of looked at each individual person on there and was like, that one looks like a ghost face. And so I was like, well,
Yeah, there was
no, go ahead.
I was going to say, I called Amber from her first scene in the hospital. There was just something about her that seemed off. She was overly sort of fussy of Sam and quite hostile. no, she was overly fussy of Tara and quite hostile towards Sam, whereas everyone else was pleased to see her. She wasn't, and I know you were supposed to think that that's because like she was like so close to Tara that
Protective
she,
of Tara.
yeah.
Yeah.
But there was just like no, and like like your daughter said, there's just something about her that sort of screamed, "I'm a scream killer."
Yeah.
So yeah, I pegged her. I thought I had a strong inkling about Richie, but I think I went back and forth and kind of hoped that they wouldn't go down that route.
Do it again. Yeah.
But then they
Boy.
did, and
Yeah.
it was what it was.
Yeah. Yeah. I was disappointed that it was Richie for sure, but I was like, okay, yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense. The
Yeah, I
guy.
mean, a little bit of trivia: Richie could have been played by Kyle.
Oh,
He
okay.
he auditioned for Richie. He obviously didn't get the part, but the Radio Silence guys liked him and then wrote in the character of Vince for him. They were like,
Oh,
dude,
okay.
we like you, we loved what you did. Not we don't quite feel it's right for this, but how about you come to set and hang out and get killed by Ghostface? And he was like, yeah, sure, let's do this. So I do, since finding out the information, I do try and sit and think how that might have played out. Maybe it would have been more of a shock just going by
Yeah.
some of his other work within the horror genre, like in the Nightmare of Remake. He's this, he's the nice, quiet, like boyfriend type. I just wonder how. And in Smile, he's the ex sort of boyfriend who clearly still holds a flame for the lead. I wonder if it would have worked slightly differently with his sort of chemistry.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's always interesting when you find out that and figure out like, how would this have changed the dynamic? Would this have altered the story in any way? Um, or at least, audience wise, like would we have seen him early on and been like, yeah, it's definitely him.
I
So
mean, I would have been Team Ghostface, after like a big fan of his career and like did him in America to be like, yeah, screw it,
right.
yeah, let's go Ghostface, like I'm in.
Yeah, like so far, like, and that's what's funny too is like none of these ghost faces have ever had a good motivation. Like, and I definitely want to get into this with number six because I've heard a lot of people complaining about uh the ghost face in number six and their motivation, and I'm like, yeah, but none of them have ever had a really good motivation. It's always been shitty. They've always been shitty revenge, like for no real reason, um, or whatever. It's like Billy, wanted to kill Sydney because, uh, her mom, slept with his dad and broke up his family. Again, that's not Sydney's fault. That's you
No,
just you know you're just being a psycho for no reason. And then, Billy's mom in the next one was just, okay, well, her son died. Yeah, because he was a psycho, and so obviously runs in the fucking family. Um, and then Romans, I can understand Roman being upset, but again, killing people and doing all this. Okay, and this is something else that really bothers me too about these new movies. There's kind of this weird Roman erasure going on. They reference him in the new one, but in the last one, there's no mention that he's Sydney's brother.
no,
And there's no mention that like that he because she says Sydney actually says that all of this is because of Billy, and it's like no, but Roman was the one who set all this in motion in the first place. Billy was like um brought in by Roman,
yeah.
for all of this to begin with. So it's weird. It's like they kind of want to erase number three in a way, um, which is frustrating because I have what I think would be a great idea for a future movie, but involving events from number three. So, but we'll get into that a little bit later.
Yeah, but I mean,
but
also like Sydney is there. She knows that Sam is Billy's daughter. she herself, as you say, is related to a ghost face. There should be
Yes.
that kinship of being like, I understand the feelings that you're going through because there was this time when I found out that my brother, it's a very interesting point that it's just glossed over. I mean, he does make an appearance. He is Scott Foley is in the episode of Dawson's Creek that Tara is watching in the hospital, so
I didn't know that. That's funny.
he is there in a way. But
Oh, that's
yeah,
funny. No, I think that I don't think they're necessarily trying to erase it. I think it's just one of those things where it just doesn't fit into the narrative that they're trying to do, where they're trying to point mostly to Billy um being the cause of everything. And how that ties into Sam's life now. Um and so it's I get it, but I do think being that I'm a big fan of number three, that it always frustrates me that uh that uh it feels like they're kind of glossing over it just a little bit, just not pointing out the things about it, because like I said, in number six they kind of very very briefly mention it, um and so it's a little weird. but but yeah, and this one with this ghost face with number five, with their motivation being, that, how can fandom be toxic, and it was very timely, and still timely to this day, because we see it a lot in, not just the horror world, but like lots of fandoms constantly have this group of people who feel like they somehow know and own uh, these properties more so than any other fans or any of the people who are creating new things. Um, and so it plays into a lot of this, and could have played into this movie as well. A lot of people could have like hated on number five so much so that it could have eaten itself in a way. I'm glad to see it didn't. But it's interesting to get that aspect of it in on screen and to kind of call it out, especially in the horror community, because you see it a lot in the horror community, people who really kind of, if they don't like something, they're going to call it out and be shitty about it. So
yeah, it really it is toxic
very, yeah.
fandom, and it's the people, as it's the Richie and the Ambers of the world, where you go, hey, I know, I thought it was really good, and then someone else is like, yeah, but how could you like this film because XYZ, and it's like, don't take away someone else's joy. If you don't like it, just don't say anything. It's that age old thing of, if you've got nothing nice to say, don't say it. But that's
Right.
the internet just hasn't grasped, because when people feel safe behind their screens, and that
Yeah.
their opinion is more valid than anybody else's, so I'm going to tell you that you're wrong. And it was interesting to place two of those characters into that role to make the audience sort of see themselves, or parts of themselves, reflected back on screen. I mean, I don't for one second think that it's made any of those sorts of people go, oh,
No,
maybe I should be
I don't think
nicer.
they have the
But
self-awareness. Yeah.
exactly. But it was still nice that they are sort of called out, and like, look, and it's almost like Justin for Rian Johnson in a way, because he's
Yeah.
mentioned as being like the director of that film, which is obviously a direct dig at the reception to his Star Wars film.
Right.
So I did feel there was a little bit of vindication for him in a strange way by going down that route.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think anybody has the self-awareness enough to look on that and go, you know what, I need to reflect on that and maybe do better. But yeah, yeah, it seems like the internet gives people a little too much freedom to just kind of spout off what they want, and think that they know best and everything just because they've seen it all and blah blah blah. It's like, shut up, we've all seen them all. Like, you know, you can have your opinion, sure, but it doesn't mean you're right. So um but um but yeah, I enjoy number five. I think it's a really good movie. I think it was a good return to form in a way. It very much honors Wes Craven and everything as a whole, but while also moving things forward into the new era and a new group of teenagers, characters that we get to see in the new movie, number six. And let's jump right into this one. I love the opening of this one. This one was a nice, um, again, one of those nice twists on stuff. Like, you know, we got in number five, we got the twist of Tara actually living. It's the first time we've had somebody who was, you know, attacked in the beginning not only live but live throughout the whole thing and survive to another day. But so it's nice that they're like changing up the formula in a way. I like that. I like that they're changing up the formula. And in this one, it was so funny too because it wasn't until recently that well, of course everybody heard that Samara Weaving was going to be in this movie. And you know, she'd been in Ready or Not with the Radio Silence guys. And so I was excited because I like Samara Weaving. And so I was like, okay, she's going to be awesome in the movie. But then it was like when I saw I guess the final trailer, I was like, oh my God, she's going to be the first one killed. I was like,
Yeah.
I know, it wasn't until then that I realized that. And then I was like, oh, she's the opening kill. And sure enough, great kill though. I love it. It's definitely kind of a shocker. And especially because the ghost face unmasks himself like right then and there. And
Yeah.
I thought we were getting a wholly different movie. I was like, oh, we're going to know who this ghost face is from the beginning. I was like, this is going to be interesting. You know, and of course they've kind of flipped that and we don't get that, but I would have been an interesting movie to kind of get that and maybe see. And this is where I got really excited about it too, because I was like, holy shit, they are really doing the cult. They're doing the cult. They're doing the cult.
Yeah.
And then and then of course they didn't, not overall. I think that I still think it's there. I really do. But I but they kind of flip it and the real ghost face of the movie you know, comes and kills him and the friend who turn out to be friends of Richie's. And so they're trying to finish a movie that they started, which was an interesting thing that we find out more about at the end as well.
Yeah,
So
I really enjoyed the opening as well. I mean, Samara Weaving is good in anything, but the just the
yes,
scenario that it felt like a very believable thing because it's not somebody in a house. It's linking. I feel that there's a lot of thematic links between 6 and 2. So again, you've got
yes, yeah,
her out in a public space. It's always a little bit, I know what you did last summer as well. She's just up at the street, safety and help is just there, but she's just that little bit too far away to get it. So it's like the you know, the little text exchanges rather than her being on the phone, and then she's on the phone and she's on the phone with him more than she is with Ghostface. So Ghostface is the last thing. And I was with you like when he revealed his face and it's the dude from Spider-Man
Spider-Man,
and the
Tony
Grand
Revolori, yeah,
and the Grand Budapest Hotel. I was like, oh my God, like, are we going to go into like a Halloween ends sort of scenario and see what makes a ghost face rather than,
right,
or you know, are we going to see him orchestrating other attacks? And I was a little deflated when he then ends up being the second
yeah,
death. But again, when you look at that cast on paper, you go, okay, so new additions, were there probably two of the more famous
yep,
people, so of course they're going to be the first kills because that
yeah,
seems to
yeah,
be the way that they're going, this new series is sort of going back to the Drew Barrymore kill, and it's the more famous you are, the more chance you've got of being offed in the first scene.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I oh man, you said something I was going to respond on that one. Now I don't remember. Um but yeah, I think that it's a great opening. It's I really wish in a way that they had continued that, but oh, that's what it was. So it's a lot of this movie, number 6, plays a lot like number 2. There's a
Yeah,
lot of callbacks. Um which, to be fair, I get they're kind of going along with, even with number 5, they were doing a lot of what number 1 did,
yeah,
specifically because that was the whole point. Richie and Amber were recreating um number 1 so they could get back to basics. And so it felt like number 2 was kind of doing a similar thing in a way. It's something I didn't really overall notice, myself at first. I should have. But being college, being, and then everybody, uh, a lot of things were very similar. But it's, which is funny too, because number 2 has always been one of the lowest on my list of movies. I think I love them all. Don't get me wrong. I think number 2 is great. It's just always been one of those ones because it followed so closely on to number 1 that I always felt like it was retreading a lot of the same material. And I think that number 6 could be argued, the same way, because we don't have as much distance. And I do think that a lot of these movies work better when they have a little bit of distance so that they can have something new to say about the genre or about movies in general. The distance between number 3 and then number 4 and then number 5, we had, a few years in between each of those so that, things had changed and we could talk more about that kind of stuff. And so with 6 following a year behind, it felt very much like that same, year behind that had between 1 and 2. And so there wasn't a whole lot of distance, but I still think, I don't know, number 6 just feels like a much stronger movie in a lot of ways for me. That because it's doing new and different things in that, it's getting away from a lot of the stuff that number 2 did, in a way.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I
Go
definitely
ahead.
appreciated that Ghostface went public more. I think that's something that they did with to a
Mm,
degree with Randy's death in the second one, where it's
yeah.
out on the university campus. But I liked the victims here. It wasn't that, oh look, now this person's on the road, and oh look, they're getting a phone call. It was the deaths were happening, in convenience stores and on
Yeah.
there
On the
was
subway. Yeah.
attacks on the subway and stuff, like places where we should feel safe,
Yeah.
in a
In
way.
public. Yeah.
Yeah, and but in a way I feel that makes 6 the more terrifying prospect, because we all know that we are not necessarily safe when we go to the convenience store and when we
Absolutely.
go on
Yeah.
the subway. And I feel that is a cleverer maneuver, because we all know that if you're home alone at night and the phone rings, oh, it's like a scary movie. But to suddenly see how internalized fears of open spaces be manipulated in that way, and especially the scene, the whole chase and kill scene in the apartment, again, it's tapping into
Yeah.
that home invasion. I mean, it happens twice. It happens with your first ghost face, and then it happens again as they're all sitting down and having dinner. They're suddenly going through a window across a ladder. It's
Yeah.
a terrifying prospect, because that feels like the more unexpected scenario. You wouldn't know until it was happening. You're on your own. You've got that whole like, oh, it's like this, but it's like a scary movie. But when confronted with that, you don't know it's happening until you're in it. And I feel that that's something that it manipulates quite well.
Yeah, I agree. That use of our fear, of, or that sense of safety in public. I mean, I think most people still have that sense of safety in public, even despite everything that's happened in the last, 20 plus years, I think there's still this idea that we can be safe, more safe in public or around other people than not. And so to then manipulate that, like you said, to then have Ghostface go into the bodega and kill on the subway and everything. It's just it's much it taps into all of that and makes it even scarier in a lot of ways, that no place is safe, that nowhere you go, not in your home, not in public, nowhere is safe, especially when it comes to Ghostface. So, and especially in this world where, because these killings have been made into these wildly popular horror movies, that people are dressing up like Ghostface, and you don't know who is the killer and who isn't the killer. You don't know who to trust, and that nowhere made that more obvious than in the subway scene. With so many of them dressed as Ghostface, and they don't know if any of them are actually the killer or if they're just all random people dressed up for Halloween. So
Yeah, the Halloween setting was definitely another sort of clever touch. I mean, the Scream franchise has been built on its horror Easter eggs, and what better time than Halloween? I mean, I will admit, I think I got a little bit distracted during the subway sequence as I was trying to like look at like, oh look, there's like Sam from Trick or Treat, and there's Pinhead over there, and there's, oh look, there's somebody dressed as Grace from Ready or Not, and
yeah,
but yeah, it was a stroke of genius to do that, because again, it helps build into this idea of cult, because it's like who is and who isn't in on this. It was
yeah.
quite
Well, and then it makes you wonder too that, like, sure, you some of them weren't there to kill anybody, but maybe they're all still part of it. They're all
yeah
playing the red herring to off balance our main characters, and that's what I love about the whole idea of this cult, that I'm hoping they're playing into at some point, that because this is obviously, these movies have had this influence on people in this world, that there are people who are from Jill on, really, that they've had this impact on people, and it's and really from 2 on, that they've had this influence on people in a way that is obviously negative, and it plays into a whole thing about this whole idea of that has been going on for years in our culture, about the role that movies play in creating killers and stuff like that, and they go into it in the Scream franchise as well. Are these movies influencing people, or or are these people just messed up? And it just goes more into this whole, and especially now in this internet age, and how easily it was able to twist that narrative on Sam that we see in this movie, that Sam was the survivor. She was the one who stopped Richie and Amber from killing everybody. And but they manipulated and turned it around, that made it seem like Richie and Amber were innocent, and she killed them, and she was the true murderer and got away with it. And it just speaks to like a deeper, like, and that's what as much as I think that that Scream movies do better with that distance, I think they actually, because I think these movies are actually being designed as more of a true potential trilogy, or however many this is going into. This is an overall story that they're doing. It's a much larger story. The first one was about toxic fandom, and this one's more about how true crime people and the way the internet affects the way we see things. So this misinformation and stuff, the way it's easy to manipulate people that want to be manipulated in that way.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting stand. I mean, I know that the Mindy does this whole spiel about, oh, now we're in a franchise, and she goes through the rules, but I don't really see how, I don't see those rules sort of lining up in other films. When they've gone through the rules, they have inevitably lined up
Right.
with what happens. But I feel here it's like the characters feel that that is what's happening, but the reality is closer to what you're saying. It's more the series is exploring our real world problem with our
Yeah.
use of the digital age and in our consumption of news and facts, and how easy, like deep fakes, suddenly Tom Cruise
Yeah.
is in a film that Tom Cruise was never in, but
Yeah.
you look at that deep fake and you wouldn't be able to tell. I think that is what it is. I feel maybe in some ways the meta aspect of the main characters is separating so that the filmmakers can show this other side.
Yeah. No, and I think it's interesting, like because you mentioned the whole bit about how Mindy talks about a franchise and how the rules that she lays out for a franchise exist. But you're right, like a lot of other horror franchises, those rules don't necessarily apply because a lot of other horror franchises continually try to reboot. They try to wipe away what came before and just try to go, okay, well, this is the new thing. Forget everything that happened before. This is the new thing. And rather than continuing, and the Scream franchise has actually been the Scream franchise is a true franchise where it's continued everything, and it's got the most consistent overall plot and continuity than almost any other franchise that's out there. So the franchise rules kind of do apply specifically only for this movie.
Yeah.
And so, and you could argue there's probably some other ones. Maybe the Saw franchise has some consistent continuity as well. And so, it's just, but if you look at like Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street or any of those other big franchises, the narrative consistency between them is kind of tenuous at best a lot of times. So no matter what the filmmakers try to do.
Yeah, I did think there were some issues that I had with six. I think
Yeah.
the big one is we all know that it was very publicized that Neve Campbell wasn't going to be returning
Yeah.
for a multitude of reasons. And I didn't quite buy the sort of throwaway line from Gail where she's like, yeah, I called Sydney and like they're going to take the kids and hide, because it didn't feel like the Sydney Prescott that we've had for 5 films before, where
Right.
she left her kids behind last time. But by the time you get to the conclusion, it makes sense because this Ghostface isn't interested in Sydney. This Ghostface has got a grudge against the Carpenter sisters. So I do think that the Radio Silence guys did a good way in explaining why Ghostface suddenly wasn't fixated on Sydney Prescott. But I kind of maybe like I don't even know if that line was needed. It's just like,
yeah,
this isn't anything to do with Sydney. She's not in New York. Let's not even mention a sort of thing. She's why would she be bothered about this? So that was one thing. And then, whereas we discussed in Scream 5, legacy characters weren't safe. Here they felt a little bit too safe. I mean,
a little too safe.
yeah. Chad, God bless him. He's a great character. He's lovely, but I mean, we thought he was dead at the end of 5, and then he gets wheeled out. Like, wait a minute.
He's the
and
new
then
Dewey
again,
for sure.
But I mean, like the new Dewey got stabbed a couple of times in Scream 2. I mean, there was two of them properly hacking him to pieces.
Yeah,
that kid is just going to be scar tissue come severed. Like right. Or he's made of Teflon. It's one or the other. It felt a little bit too. And the same with Gail, and then with Mindy, it's kept sort of like faking out, like, oh wait, told you no one was safe. Oh, but actually they are. I don't know. I just feel like maybe somebody could have gone, just to make it a bit more exciting, because the people who did die, we didn't really know anything about. I mean, what I think
they were all throwaway people. Yeah.
I mean, you've got that, like Samara Weaving's character and the visuals who aren't properly connected to the core characters. Okay, you've got a film lecturer and then a friend of Tara's, but they're not fully integrated. The only one who is Mindy's girlfriend, and
Right.
that's kind of all we know about her. She is the only death from the main group who isn't a ghost face, and
Right.
that I'm kind of used to there being a bit more fodder throughout a Scream
Yeah.
film.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what we get Annika, Mindy's girlfriend. We get Gail's boyfriend. Um we get the two in the beginning. Um we get the people in the bodega, the a couple of people in the bodega.
The
Um
therapist,
the therapist, yeah. So I mean it's not light on kills, but yeah, definitely within that core group, it feels like there's nobody really dying. There feels like there's almost no stakes in a way because they just keep coming back. Um, and I thought that same way too. I was like, what? How is Chad still alive?
yeah,
He was stabbed so many times. Um, and it didn't make any sense to me. And I was like, I'm happy to see that he's alive. He's a great character. I'd like to see more of him. But it just felt a little weird. But yeah, so I think that there's definitely a lot of kills, but there is definitely not that core group, and it definitely feels like they have what people like to call plot armor.
yeah.
It's like we need them to survive like Gail Dewey and Sydney survived every episode, every movie, so that they can make it to the next one.
Yeah. I struggled to buy Kirby as an FBI agent. I just in my head when they said, "Oh, it's FBI," I just flashed to Point Break with Keanu Reeves as Johnny Utah going, "I'm an FBI agent." It didn't seem like the career path that Kirby would do, and there is that little Easter egg in 5 of she's talking in one of the YouTube videos, and I was sort of thinking like
Yeah,
how then is somebody who is in the FBI appearing on YouTube videos talking about stab films? I don't quite understand where there's that FBI agent by day, film fanatic influencer by
I
night. I'm
can
not sure.
kind of see it, based on like the way she said it. The incident, the the events that happened to her made her want to take some control over it, and I can see where they would put her kind of like. So it feels kind of like she would be in a very similar to role as to what Mark Kincaid was in number 3. That she's somebody who knows these killings and at least what little she knew about it maybe has studied up on the whole thing and has become maybe some like they're kind of expert on Ghostface. And so I can kind of say I'll give them a little bit of that, but but yeah, it did feel a little weird for sure.
Yeah, I definitely struggled with that reveal. I don't know, maybe it's the film fan in me just doesn't see myself ever going down that route. Obviously, I've not been through the sort of trauma that she
Yeah.
went through, but I don't know. I think it's also obviously like Hayden Panettiere. She's so small, and just the idea of her being this badass FBI agent, just it in your head when you think FBI, you think, or at least I think, somebody that's a little taller in stature and a bit more
Right.
together. But I know Hayden from Scream and more recently Nashville, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean Juliet's she's a feisty character, but just I don't know, FBI agent just doesn't ring true. I mean, cop, detective, like I would have like a detective drafted in by the FBI, sure, but it's the FBI thing because she is. I mean, Gail mentions it, but she is still quite young to be
Yeah.
so high up within the ranks of the FBI.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that. I don't know. I enjoyed it. I actually like her character more in this movie than I did in number 4. I've never been a huge Kirby fan. like number four has always been kind of low on the list for me in general anyway. And I understand why everybody loves Kirby. She's kind of a more cantankerous version of Randy in a way. Um, but I don't know, something I have always liked Hayden Panettiere as an actress. I think she does great work. But for whatever reason, it didn't gel well with me in number four. But with this one, like I really enjoyed the character a lot more, and I felt like they kind of like flipped it on us for a minute there. I was just like, oh my god, they're not really making her the killer, are they? Like I was like, no, come on. And then I was like, because they've talked about that, like fans have
Yeah.
kind of wanted that too, somebody who was a victim who then became a ghost face. And I was just always like, I just don't see that happening. Sure, I can maybe understand it happening to somebody, but just within this framework, I just don't ever see that happening. But so I was glad to see that in the end it really wasn't true. But again, we get down to the true ghost face, and their motivation is shit as usual. Um,
Yeah.
which I think is where a lot of people end up having a problem with the movie. I haven't seen anybody really have too big of a problem with the movie. Most people seem to enjoy it, but a lot of people, or the few quibbles that I have seen, um, have been about the motivation, and just about how shitty it is. I'm like, okay, but you can accept Debbie's, like, Billy Loomis's mom's motivation, but not this one. It's the exact same motivation. So
Yeah. For me, obviously, it's the first time that there's been three, technically four, if you
yes.
include the guy from the beginning. But I, again, similarly to Amber in five, as soon as I met Quinn and as soon as I met her dad, I knew it was them. I mean, they might as well have just been wearing the ghost face mask as they were telling them, like, oh, my brother died a year ago, my son died a year ago, and it's like, oh, who do we know that happened a year ago that
That's
might
funny.
have the brother. I didn't see, but that was purely because I've been trained by the Scream franchise to expect two ghost faces.
Right.
And so I had my two, and then I was done. And he at least didn't go into any like, oh yeah, so my brother. He was a bit more of an unknown, but he said earlier in the back of my head, I really wanted it to be their mother. And you've got the dad here, which again ties back into the thematic links of two, where it's the
Right.
mother of the killer. Here it's still a parent of the killer, but I really wanted it to be their mother for a point of,
Sam and Tara's
yeah,
mom.
yeah.
Yeah.
So then again, we've still got that parental linkage to two, but it was just too early signpost for me. So I was like, oh, so it's going to be those two. And then it was those two. And there was that moment where obviously there was the fake out with Kirby, and it's like, oh, and then it wasn't. And then again, I just felt a bit dejected that it shouldn't be that easy to know who it's going to be.
Right.
I want a bit
Yeah.
more like even with Richie, it's like probably is, but maybe it's not, but maybe it is. But with Quinn, like, even the Quinn dying thing, you don't in Scream, if somebody's dead, you see them dead. It's why in Scream 5, when Chad is revealed, because we haven't seen his dead body.
Yeah.
So when he rocks up and he's alive, it's, and again in 6, we don't, and with Gail, we don't see them die, so we know that there's a chance that they're alive. And with Quinn, it was sort of heavily implied, and then you've got the scene where he goes in and he comes out crying, but I just didn't buy it at all. And I don't profess to be, I don't know, the most adept at working out who done it, so when I can guess it, I'm a little disappointed.
Yeah. Yeah, my daughter called Quinn. She that was when she thought it was somebody else, though it was the second killer. But then when Quinn, quote died, she was like, well, I guess it's not her. Then who is it? And so, she didn't really know who it was. And then when it was revealed Quinn was one of them, she was like, oh, okay, I knew it.
Yeah.
So um yeah, don't get me wrong, I was a little disappointed that it was them, and that they were tied to Richie. That part of it kind of disappointed me just because I was like, ugh, okay, I guess. But I was just like, a dad and his kids like working together, like all of them would be like involved in this. Is like nobody thought this was a bad idea.
Yeah.
Um, like I know your brother died and everything like that, but he was trying to kill other people. Like, it's this whole family of psychopaths.
Yeah. It's
Like
it's
not
the
a single
parent.
one of
Yeah.
them was bad, or
Yeah.
not a single one of them was good, and thought, no, let's not do this.
Yeah, and there's definitely that thing in the Scream franchise as well with parents' inability to realize their children's shortcomings because, the
Yeah,
dad during this monologue is like, he was a filmmaker and he was really good. And then in the background you can see like Richie doing his blogs and his like student homages
yeah,
to Stab and stuff. And whilst it's valiant that he's made them, you can tell that they're not all that. And it does
no,
tie into some parents' inability to admit that their child might not be the absolute bestest at
right,
everything. I mean, I'm a parent of a 4-year old. I love my daughter dearly, but there are some things that she can't do, and that's absolutely fine. But I'm not going to pretend to her that like, oh yeah, amazing, you're fantastic, you're the best person in the
yeah,
world at this, because that does nothing for her. And then it sort of warps my mind. But in the Scream franchise, Billy can do no wrong for Debbie,
yeah,
and Richie can do not only no wrong for his dad, but his brother and sister also seemingly idolize him. I mean, if Richie
yeah,
was my brother, I'd probably think he was really irritating. So
right. Oh yeah, no, I did that was the part that like rang a little hollow to me. But again, like I said before, that this whole franchise is full of this kind of shitty motivation that makes absolutely no sense, you know, for anything else. But it rings true to the real world. You see that most of these people who are killing people for whatever reasons have the shittiest dumbest reasons ever for
yeah.
killing people. So it rings true to reality. Like, of course I want more in my entertainment. I want more, grandiose reasons and something more poetic and and everything. We're not going to get that. And I think that's what's great about Scream is that, when it comes down to it, these motivations are always going to be crappy, and that that if people would think on it just a little bit more, maybe they just wouldn't do this. But my other thing was too is that this whole, like, we get this whole shrine thing, which is very cool. We get all these
Yes.
callbacks to all of the movies, including this big thing on the stage of all of the ghost face masks and cloaks and knives and everything. And I'm like, what kind of money did Richie have that he could afford to not only find and buy all this shit? Um, and I know that part of it was that they said that, because the dad was a cop and everything like that, that stuff goes missing from evidence all the time, and that kind of is maybe kind of how they got some of it. But that only goes so far. I mean, he's a cop, sure, but he doesn't have jurisdiction or access to any of these things in Woodsboro or Hollywood or wherever these other things were at. So it was a little weird. And I would think that, that kind of stuff on a collector's market, especially, a serial killer, you uh, fan kind of thing, that kind of stuff would be very hard to get. And if not that, very expensive to get. And so it was weird that he had pretty much everything. So,
Yeah, and especially as like, two of those previous films that they've or the outings that they've collected memorabilia from were in Woodsboro, and therefore your police force is Dewey and or
yeah,
Judy. I don't, and or even the other police who work there, they have other colleagues who are maybe there's a few cops who were killed in 4. I'm not I don't quite grasp how much money they would need to disregard their own personal trauma and
Yeah,
hand over Jill's mask or Billy's mask. Like I don't see that happening on Dewey or Judy's watch, but then to be after them would be too late. They wouldn't have been in the museum for
yeah,
Richie to play
yeah.
with. So
I
that
mean,
that is
it's
where
a
the plot wears a little
yeah,
thin.
yeah. I mean, you know, if you apply too much logic to it, sure. You know, and I it was something I thought about afterward because in the moment you're just like, oh my god, this is so cool. You know, this is
Yeah.
awesome. You know, this is
You're busy
great. You know,
spotting like, oh yeah, look, there's Tatum's full outfit and there's
yeah.
like the knife
There's
that stabbed
Casey's
Kirby.
sweater.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I did like how all of the blades were covered in blood, despite the fact that every time we see Ghostface kill
he
somebody,
wipes it off. Yeah,
yeah. So,
yeah. It's a whole thing with them. Like and that's what's funny too, because like this whole this number six, they had a whole marketing campaign around them all wiping blood off of knives. Like
yeah,
every character like had a knife and they wiped blood off of it or whatever. It was like a whole thing. And then like every knife in this movie was just crusted with previous blood, which is completely unsanitary.
yeah,
But yeah, but yeah, no, I love the shrine bit. Like it's because it's just, you know, as a fan, you know, that's just one of those things where like somebody needs to make a cool exhibit of Scream stuff like that. And that would just be like like that's the funny thing. Like Richie having gotten all that stuff, he could have made a killing rather than killing people. He could have made huge amounts of money, like displaying this in like locations or whatever like that. Like just having people come and view it all. Um, you know, he could have made a cool little serial killer stab scream museum, and just made so much money. You know, it wouldn't. He could have financed his own better movie. So
exactly. Yeah.
rather than killing people to make it, you know, he could have made his own movie regardless. And so it's like, okay, that's just weird. So things you think about later. So I do want to kind of get into some theory bit here. There is everybody's been talking about this for a while, and it seems like they're kind of moving towards this. Even if you know, and I don't know when they're going to get to it, but we've talked about the cult thing a little bit, and I feel like they kind of played into that a little bit with the opening, and I feel like there's the potential to move that forward in later movies. But there's the whole Stu Macher of it all. I feel like they're really, really like putting in these Easter eggs pointing to him being a potential like person who's kind of over all of this. Um, you know, we get in number five, we got a couple of lines about, oh yeah, Stu Macher was just Billy's partner. And it's very throwaway, very disrespectful, kind of like, oh, Stu Macher wasn't anything. It's all Billy, you know, and you know, especially with Sam being Billy's daughter, that you know he just gets dismissed a lot. But the house that Amber lived in, where the finale takes place, was Stu Macher's house. In this one, we get that moment where there's the TV in the shrine. They focus on it, and then it gets used to hit one of the ghost faces later. So we get all these little nods to Stu, but without you know any kind of, we haven't gotten anything about that. Now I know that one of the ideas for Scream 3 was originally going to be very similar to this idea that Stu Macher was going to be back and he was influencing high schoolers in that one to kill people. And to kind of recreate the events of Scream 1. They ended up having to go a different route after Columbine happened.
Mm.
And that's why Scream 3 is as funky as it is in a lot of ways. But I feel like they might potentially be going to this. What do you think?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think they ended up using that they repurposed it into the Kevin Bacon cop drama The Following.
Yes, yeah,
um
that part, yeah, for sure.
yeah, I think that's which is a great series. If anyone listening hasn't watched it,
Yes,
watch it.
excellent series.
Especially if you like Edgar Allan Poe, boy, you're in for a treat.
Oh, James Purefoy is like
Yes.
so good in that.
Yeah, I have interviewed him, and it was post
Oh
watching
yeah.
The Following, and it was terrifying because I was like, I'm sat here with Joe Carroll, like, oh, um, I don't know. I mean, I love the first Scream, and I think that Billy and Stu are the ghost faces that will never be topped. There's that really, as much as the motives might not land, I think they're a believable duo of ghost faces because they're just
Right.
like film film bros who have just they're attention seeking, and they're, you know, like the epitome of toxic masculinity.
Yes.
I think we mentioned earlier, you know, Billy's, you know, he's desperately trying to seduce Sydney, and then like Stu is just, he kind of feels very whiny and spoiled rich kid, you know. Oh, Casey broke up with him and now he's with Tatum, but that's not good enough for him.
Yeah.
But I feel that Stu was killed. I don't know how they could explain him surviving. I mean, Billy stabbed him really deep. You know, he was either going to, you know, he was figured he was going to bleed out, and
Bleed
then
out, yeah.
TVs back in the day were
Very heavy.
big and heavy, and
Yeah.
you know, I struggle to know how much face he's got left
Yeah.
after that, and you kind of need to have a, a head to remain alive. So like, I would like to see Stu back because I think he was a great ghost face, very different to Billy, and it'd be interesting to see that his motivation has literally just become his erasure from the history. Like the
Yeah.
Woodsboro murders of Billy Loomis, the Woodsboro murders, oh, and Stu Macker. I can see that through line where he's been sat in prison and it's just been festering and boiling. And how many years ago are we now from Scream? You know, could he have got out for good behavior and used the insanity defense, or, you know, his peer pressure defense? He was bullied into it. You know, Billy was blackmailing him in some way or controlling him. You know,
Right.
there is a tangible story where he gets out after 20 or so years, and that's why these things are coming. But I do struggle with believing him to have survived, full stop.
Yeah. No, I get that. I just, you know, we've seen that, you know, we talked about Chad, you know, Chad should not have survived, you know, everything. And, you know, it's that's where I'm like, okay, well, these movies are like that, where these people, some of these people have survived quite a bit of damage and managed to get out. Yeah, I would think though that too, like, yeah, if Stu had been in jail, we would have gotten some kind of mention of it during
Yeah.
all of this. Um, you know, like, you know, maybe people would have interviewed him during all this time or whatever. My theory was just that he somehow escaped. You know, you know, and but also that would have been talked about as well. So, you know, so there's definitely some narrative inconsistencies
Yeah.
to get over. To
And if
if you
he is
were to bring him
controlling,
back,
yeah, and if he is controlling them, why is he killing his nephew? Vince is his nephew. You know,
yeah,
what's
yeah,
his sister's kid done? You know, why?
yeah,
Unless it's again to sort of, you know, throw them off. But I feel like if you went down the Stu Marker route, maybe you bring in the sister. You know, maybe you bring in Vince's mum, who is
yeah,
enraged that her son her son was killed. You know, hashtag justice for Kyle. I'm gonna keep
yeah.
beating that drum. um but for me, I want Sam and Tara's mum to be involved in some way. She was obviously
Yeah,
a Billy Loomis fangirl while he was alive, and I feel from the bits of information that we have, it's just showing that she's been mentioned in both films, but we haven't seen it. I feel that there's got to be a point. And if we're going through the thematics of the original trilogy, in Scream 1 and 2, Maureen, Sydney's mum, is talked about a lot but not seen. And then the third film is kind of all about Maureen. It's
Yeah.
Sydney going and finding the secret history of
The
her mother.
sins of the mother. Yeah.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
kind of feel
Yeah.
that we could potentially be going forward into a direction where Samantara's mum plays some sort of significant part
Yeah.
in the next film. So I'm gonna maybe and I mean, and if they did, and it is anything related to occult and stuff, and it's like the opening line from Ghostface in 5, then that would be just, I would bow down to Radio Silence for having it sort of alluded to right from like scene 1 of their first
Right.
film to then have it revealed in the end scene of their last film. I think would be a stroke of genius, but who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure. I think that there's another interesting wrinkle in all this that uh, I brought up on the last episode. That in Scream 3, there were supposed to be two killers. It was only late in production that they decided to change it to one killer, and that there's evidence of this second killer throughout the movie, and that killer was supposed to be Angelina Tyler, the actress who was playing Sydney in Stab 3.
Mm.
And you can see it, like there was that moment where she gets caught by Sydney in the bathroom, and she plays it off as just trying to steal some memorabilia or whatever.
Yeah.
But and then she gets supposedly killed at the end, and her body gets dragged away by by Ghostface or whatever. So there's this interesting bit where it's either, sure, she might have. So so my thing is that they made it only one killer, because again, this was in the wake of Columbine, and so they went, instead of the two killer route, they went the one killer route. And they but when she gets dragged off, when she's killed, it's either you can see it as he killed his partner to get rid of her and to shut her up, to get rid of any potential problems later, or the death was faked, and then she ends up getting away with it. So there's potentially a Ghostface killer who actually made it out alive and is still out there somewhere.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So I always thought that would be an interesting thing to bring back. If we're going to bring back Stu, that you also bring back Angelina Tyler in a way, because I mean, you never really see her dead. You just kind of see her laying there on the ground and then pulled away, like she's dead. And so it to me, it's still kind of left ambiguous, especially finding out later that was the intention, was that she was supposed to be the second killer. So it would be an interesting play to bring back this other Ghostface that was there, and tie it back into that and make that the original intent again. So, but that's just my theory, my fun idea.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's like me and my rabbit hole with the mum. There are these little threads throughout the franchise, and you can just pull at them just enough to get some rope to continue down in different directions. I mean, what I hope they don't do is I really hope that they don't make Sam the ghost face.
Oh, yeah.
They've teased it a few, she finally listened to Billy and killed Richie in 5, and then at the end of this, the beginning of 6, she's saying that she quite liked the killing. It was it was a release for her. And then at the end, she sort of you find that she's kept the mask, and it's only sort of when Tara approaches that she sort of is snapped out of this hold that this mask has got on her, and she sort of chucks it aside. I'm really hoping that that's a fake out and they're not building to Sam becoming a ghost face, because I'm not sure what that would say in relation to her mental illness. Are we sort of going
Yeah.
backwards a little bit in the representation of mental health in horror if we were to go down that scenario, because I don't see anything else other than that being a causation for her to become Ghostface.
I think kind of what they're alluding to in this one in number 6 with this too of her looking at the mask and her throwing it away when Tara's there is that she can go down this road. Like she's trying to stay near Tara. And it becomes an issue in the movie that she's holding on to Tara a little too much. But I feel like she's holding on to Tara because that was something she lost um when she found out about Billy, and that she's gone down this like road by herself, and that Tara is helping her in a way to combat that,
Mm.
like having that family that's not related to Billy, having this sister that's a part of something else, something more for the future rather than what's in her past. That's kind of how I feel like they were kind of focusing that with this movie, was moving that forward and hopefully trying to get out of that, because yeah, I don't want to see that either. I that would disappoint me greatly to see her as the ghost face, um because it just it would be disappointing. As much as I know a lot of fans would be happy to, not necessarily with Sam, but like somebody who is a previous victim to Ghostface become a Ghostface. um it's one of those constant theories you hear, but I think that doing that would cheapen what Sam is going through. And like you said, especially with in terms of mental illness and everything, that working on that progress, that it feels like she, because that's what I mean, that's her whole point in this episode, or in this movie too, is that she's working through it. She's talking to
Mm.
therapists, she's trying to work through this, she's on her medication, she's suppressing that because that's not something she wants. She's working on getting past it. And throughout this incident, yes, it brings it back up and and all that, but she's still at the end of it, she's embracing moving forward and away from Billy. And I think that's what they're overall trying to tell us. And that's my hope anyway.
Yeah, that's definitely my hope too.
All right. Well, is there anything else that we didn't talk about that you wanted to mention about these either of these two movies?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've we've definitely covered a lot. There's definitely a lot to take away from both of these films. I mean, I guess I just want to know when the franchise is going to space. That's what these franchises do, right? It's
Let's hope never.
I don't know, maybe that's, Tara decides that she
She
heeds
wants to be an
Kirby's,
astronaut.
yeah, she heeds Kirby's words and she's like, I don't really want to become the monster. I just want to just like get the hell out of Dodge. And like they all end up working on like the International Space Station or something. And then, Ghostface finds a way.
If they're going to go that route, let's go more for the Jason X route and go like deeper into the future, and like, and Ghostface is up there then.
Well, that's
uh,
that's how Stu returns. He was a
there
rich
you go.
kid. He was cryogenically frozen. They couldn't reconstruct his face. He's been given like a robotic Jason like ghost
But
face
it's just
mask.
Ghostface mask. Yeah.
Yeah, and he awakens and
All chrome.
still thinks that he's living in like what 1996, 1997, and just starts hacking people up.
All right. I'm sold. All right. All right. Well, why don't you let people know where they can find you, and anything that you're working on currently?
So I can be found on most social medias at Gizmo Shikari. There's links to all of my stuff. And my big sort of news is twofold. I am now a guest contributor for Ghouls magazine. I did something for them at the end of last year. Really enjoyed working with them. So I'm now going to be doing some more writing with them. and the US release of Addison Hyman's Hypochondriac. Addison approached me and asked me to write an essay about the film, which is one of my favorite films of last year, and I adore it. And I was very privileged to be able to write a few words about what makes that film so special. So that's my big news.
Awesome. That's great. I will definitely keep my eyes out for those.
Yeah, it's
All
it's
right.
out it's out in March. I can't remember the exact date, but by the end of March,
Okay.
via Vinegar Syndrome, you'll be able to have a copy of that film and read some words by myself.
All right. Excellent. Well, I appreciate you coming back on again, and we'll get you back on again in the future. Thanks again to Kat for joining me for this final episode on the Scream franchise. Next episode, Ashley Thomas joins me to talk about a couple of post-Scream slashers, Urban Legend and Valentine, both directed by Jamie Blanks. Thanks for listening. If you liked what you heard, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app or at creepyandgeeky.com. You can follow the podcast on social media at Creepy and Geeky on both Twitter and Instagram. If you'd like to follow me, I'm Geek Thulu on Twitter and geek.thulu on Instagram. You can support the podcast by ordering teas and more from our TeePublic page. All of the links are in the show notes. Finally, don't forget, stay creepy.